Hey, this is Zulem Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Ow! Okay, we'll start with this. Canelo Alvarez's loss yesterday to Dimitri Bivol is going to leave us with a lot to reflect upon and a lot to talk about in the weeks to come. So we're going to break this down into segments. What I think should be next for Canelo Alvarez, which isn't necessarily what I think he's going to do, but what he should do. And what I think he should do off the top of my head is abandon that campaign at 175 pounds for the time being. If Dimitri Bivol proved anything yesterday,
it's too big.
It's that Canelo Alvarez was biting off more than he could chew up there. We talked about that in my recap video. What I think Canelo Alvarez should do for at least the next 2 to 3 fights is remain the super middleweight division's undisputed champion, get himself back in the winner's bracket with that Gennady Golovkin trilogy.
I still like his chances against the 40-year-old Gennady Golovkin.
I don't think Canelo should activate any rematch clause to face Dimitri for a second time. I don't see what he could do differently in a second fight that he didn't try in the first. The size was simply too much to contend with, the size and durability. But Gennady's long in the tooth. He's up there in age.
That fight still draws a decent-sized crowd.
Still does well at the box office. Still does well at the gate. Gennady Golovkin still has a bigger name than anyone else at or around these weights, Dimitri Bivol included. He's got a bigger name than Jermall Charlo, a bigger name than David Benavidez. For Christ's sakes, David's
about to fight a guy Gennady smacked around 7 years ago.
These guys are happy facing everybody else's leftovers. Everybody with an actual name and an actual following.
You know, the kind of following they ain't got because they're fighting leftovers instead of fighting an exciting fight.
I say Canelo Alvarez goes into that Gennady Golovkin trilogy. He should go ahead with that. That's what the plan was if he would have emerged the victor. I think he should proceed as planned. I think he should take on today's Gennady Golovkin because he stands a better chance of beating him.
Because he stands a better chance of beating Gennady in a trilogy than he does of beating Bivol in a rematch.
If he beats Gennady in a trilogy, forget about 175 pounds, at least for the time being, at least for the next 3 to 4 fights. What you do is you sit there at 168 pounds and you defend the undisputed super middleweight championship against the likes of Demetrius Andrade, who's already plotting a move upstairs once he recovers from his shoulder injury, against the likes of David Benavidez, and against the likes of Jermall Charlo, because none of those 3 guys pose the exact same challenges that Dimitri would. Dimitri's not just a big guy.
He's a big guy who can move and punch.
Big guy that can really box. Now these guys,
at least 2 of them, they're just like you.
What they are is junior middleweights that moved up to middleweight, subsequently super middleweight. That's what those guys are. That's what Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo.
That's what they are. Now you flex some A-side muscle on those guys.
You guys have been running around for years, saying my name to any interviewer that's willing to interview you, looking to ride my coattails and clout chase off of my success, the waves that I'm creating. If I'm Canelo Alvarez, I give those guys a shot. I give those guys an opportunity because those guys are easier to beat than Dimitri Bivol.
David Benavidez, too.
David's whole thing is being bigger than everybody else, being bigger than most super middleweights. He's certainly not the cerebral boxer that Dimitri Bivol is. He's not battle-tested at light heavyweight the same way that Dimitri Bivol is.
He's not.
David Benavidez is a guy who's squeezing down. He's still squeezing down to 168 pounds when he knows his body wants him to go up to light heavyweight. And because he's doing this over time, he will find himself in a weakened state. Thus, beating him might prove easier than beating Dimitri Bivol. Beating him and putting a dent in that guy might be easier.
Yeah, because he's draining himself.
The guy's busting at the seams, but he still wants to wade in the kiddie pool. He still wants to stay at 168 pounds for the foreseeable future. So I say, you take that guy on.
Well, the only reason he's not paying for draining himself is because he doesn't fight anybody good.
None of these guys do really, and what their claim to fame really is clout chasing Canelo Alvarez and name dropping him in interviews. So I say it's high time Canelo give those guys an opportunity. He give those guys a shot.
Canelo just went 12 rounds with a full-fledged light heavyweight, and he didn't go down, didn't go out.
His defense is still held up even though he was outgunned and outsized, and he still has some hell of a beard that he didn't go down and didn't go out after 12 rounds with Dimitri Bivol. If Dimitri couldn't knock this guy out, I'd wager Charlo can't. Charlo couldn't put away Montiel. He's going to put away Canelo.
Demetrius went 12 rounds with Liam Williams.
Put him down early in the fight, but Liam got back up, whereas Chris Eubank Jr., how many times did Chris Eubank Jr. drop that same Liam Williams?
I like Canelo's chances against any one of those three guys more than I like his chances against Bivol.
I think exercising a rematch clause would be foolhardy. I think it would be a mistake.
These guys are far more beatable and they can't shut the fuck up about you.
So you flex your A-side muscle because you're still a bigger draw than any of them, and you're still super middleweight division's undisputed champion.
What I think he ought to do.
But I don't know if he'll do it. We'll talk more about this moving forward. Men's junior welterweight news. The WBC,
They've ordered Josh Taylor to defend his title against Jose Zepada.
this news broke a little over a week ago per the WBC's press release. As per prior communications and with the agreement, which all four presidents, WBC, WBO, IBF, and WBA confirmed in the meeting held in Puerto Rico, the WBC mandatory defense is next, followed by the IBF. The WBC is hereby advising of the beginning of the free negotiation period for Josh Taylor's mandatory title defense versus Jose Zepada.
And there must have been some confusion because this news broke after the WBA's order came down.
WBA very recently ordered Josh Taylor to satisfy his mandatory challenger in Alberto Puello. Shortly afterwards, this press release from the WBC came down, and what it appears to indicate is that the WBC's next in the rotation, followed by the IBF.
And all four alphabet organizations are in compliance.
That includes the WBA, so one can assume that Josh doesn't actually have to satisfy his mandatory by way of the WBA next. Alberto Puello, he's just going to have to wait. Back to the WBC. If no agreement is reached, the WBC will conduct a purse bid Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. They have till the end of this month to reach a deal.
Both guys are pretty much on the same side of the street.
The top-ranked side of things, and there's a bit of uncertainty in association with what the future holds for Josh, because initially it was believed he'd be moving up to welterweight, and he said as much after the Jack Catterall fight. Controversial Jack Catterall fight that most people had Jack Catterall winning, myself included. I had Jack winning that fight by a point.
Not the widest of margins, but still a point.
Had Jack winning that fight. Josh Taylor needs redemption. And he can achieve it if he actually fights Jose Zepada and beats him in convincing fashion. Jose Zepada, who had a Fight of the Year candidate, Fight of the Year in my book, against Ivan Baranchik. A stellar knockout over then unbeaten Puerto Rican sensation, up-and-comer, Josue Vargas.
If Josh can beat that guy in convincing fashion,
I'd say it goes a long way towards redeeming him in the eyes of the boxing community, the boxing fans who think,
you got a gift.
by all rights, he should have lost all those alphabet titles to Jack Catterall. I do think a win over Jose would go a long way towards redeeming him. The question is Josh Taylor going to actually stay at 140 pounds? Can he make that weight comfortably? Can he make it healthy?
He's got more opponent options as an undisputed champion than a guy moving up in weight.
And these are interesting opponent choices, interesting fights. Let's be honest, Top Rank can't do much for him at 147 pounds, but at 140, they can put him in some good fights, some risky ones.
Still good fights.
Months ago, the feeling was that Josh, after the Catterall fight, he'd move up in weight, he'd take on Terence Crawford, but plans have changed, and it seems like what Terence Crawford's going to do at some point is take on Errol Spence Jr. That's what the news has been. So he's not actually an option for Josh at this time, and Josh can't force a fight with Terence Crawford, not yet, not as his mandatory challenger.
Terence Crawford ain't due to satisfy another one of those for some months.
Josh is stuck, and what options he does have are all as an undisputed champion, a defending undisputed champion. Those are his best options to participate in decent-sized fights, interesting ones, risky ones, but those are his best options right now.
You know, historically, Josh hasn't looked too hot against southpaws.
Southpaws like himself, he doesn't have that advantage over them. They mirror each other. Think about it. He didn't look dominant against Regis Prograis. He won the fight. He definitely won the fight, but he didn't look dominant against Regis. He looked terrible against Jack Catterall. Jose Zepada, he's a southpaw, like those guys are southpaws.
Josh ain't been looking too hot. You get the sense this might be a problem.
Tosh Jailer strikes me as a man who's stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's nothing up there for him right now at 147 pounds. Can't force a fight with Terence Crawford. He's got mandatory after mandatory lining up to take their shot at his crown, and this is at a time when he may be struggling to make the weight. I really don't know what the future holds for this guy. The interesting fights just so happen to be in a division.
It's nothing but killers at 140 pounds right now.
Division that, in my honest opinion, is one of the deeper divisions in the sport of boxing right now, even if it isn't one of the glamour weights. You know, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, heavyweight.
Think about it. Think about the guys that make up today's 140-pound division.
Jose Zepada, Jose Pedraza, Jose Ramirez, Gary Antoine Russell, Subriel Matias, Regis Prograis,
Jack Catterall,
Montana Love. Very soon, Teofimo Lopez, his planned ring return, which is supposed to be going down this summer, he's going to be coming back, and he's going to be coming back as a 140-pound fighter.
It's a deep division.
And if Josh Taylor insists on sticking around as that division's undisputed champion, he really does have his work cut out for him.
He's fallen from grace.
Fallen out of the fight fans' favor after that Jack Catterall fight, but with the right string of fights, as a defending undisputed champion, he can win back their favor. There is a feeling that perhaps at some point he should run it back with Jack Catterall.
He can't do it now because he's got too many mandatories lining up.
Assuming he plans on hanging on to all of those alphabet titles, he can't run it back with that guy without sacrificing at least one of them. So
those two guys were very recently trading barbs on social media.
Well, from the look of things, it doesn't look like it's going to materialize into an actual fight. I have no doubts that Jack Catterall doesn't just want to run it back with Josh Taylor. He wants it to be for the undisputed championship. He wants it to be for all the belts. And a situation like that right now really can't be negotiated because Josh is under orders. He's got to fight Jose Zepada.
Who's no slouch, by the way.
Listen, that's a pretty good goddamn fight. I wouldn't mind seeing it if they can get it over the line and if Josh Taylor can still make 140 pounds. And just in keeping with the theme of news at or around welterweight, Terence Crawford says he wants to go straight into the fight with Errol.
I told you, he's not thinking about Josh Taylor.
I'm free to do whatever I want, Crawford said. There's nothing standing in the way from us fighting. There's no promotional company that's blocking it. There's no wrong side of the street. There's no nothing. Let's see who the best welterweight in the world is.
In theory, the fight should be easy to make.
Errol Spence Jr.'s supporters no longer have Bob Arum and Top Rank to lean on as an excuse. No longer have Bob Arum and Top Rank to blame for the fight not happening. Top Rank and Bob Arum, they're not in the picture anymore.
So in theory, that should make the situation less complicated.
I won't lie to you. I questioned the physical condition of Errol Spence Jr. leading up to that Ugas fight, so much so that I actually picked Ugas to beat him. And to my surprise, Errol Spence Jr. completely dominated Ugas. For whatever reason, whatever your interpretation of that fight is as to why Ugas didn't put up more of a fight.
Whatever your interpretation is, yours or mine.
Errol won the fight, and by all rights, the eye's not an issue. Neither is the car accident. The guy's in tip-top shape at the peak of his physical powers, his physical prowess.
I don't want to hear no excuses when Terrence knocks this guy out.
Now everybody's saying that Errol's back and he's 100% ready, so now is the perfect time for me and him to fight, Crawford said. He caught me out, so it ain't no backing up. Definitely, it's bigger now. There's a lot at stake. Undisputed's on the line. That's bigger than the fight that was going to happen between us in the past. This will be my second undisputed title run in two different weight classes. 140 pounds is the other. That's never been done before in the history of boxing, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
And I think he can do it. I think he can become an undisputed champion at two weights.
He's already a champion overall in three: 135 pounds, 140 pounds, and 147. I'm going straight into it, said Crawford, a 34-year-old native of Omaha, Nebraska. I don't want no tune-up fights. I don't want nothing. I want to go straight into it. He added, the way we can get this fight done is them sending me an offer, and we look at the offer and sit down at the table and we discuss what's needed from both sides. Team Spence, Team Crawford, and we get the fight done like that. My team is just waiting on them to get in touch with us and make this fight happen.
You know, Errol Spence Jr. is the A-side.
Or he's supposed to be, because his pay-per-views regularly outperform Terence Crawford's pay-per-views, and he is in possession of more alphabet titles than Terence Crawford, so the argument is there for Errol Spence Jr. to be the A-side in this situation, but what that also means is that the ball is in his court to send an offer.
That's what that entails, because we're not talking about a fight happening anywhere else.
This is supposed to be a PBC pay-per-view, right? Involving a PBC fighter, so where's the offer?
Terrence is gonna knock this fucking guy out.
Go on, Terence Crawford! Said Spence, ESPN's number 6 pound-for-pound boxer. He said that after he defeated Ugas. That's the fight that I want. That's the fight everybody else wants. I'm going to get these straps, then go over there and take his too. Terrence, I'm coming for that belt.
Yeah, that's what he said post-fight.
Terrence Crawford said, it's time to happen. The time is now for Undisputed. I just think this is the fight where I can display my skills and my talent to the fullest. I think Spence is a great fighter, and I think being in the ring with another great fighter will bring greatness out of me.
It'd be a huge disappointment if this year comes and goes and this fight don't happen.
It would be a black eye for the sport, an indictment against it, because by all rights, there are no political boundary lines at this time that either fighter has to cross. Terrence Crawford still is a network and promotional free agent, free to field offers from whoever is willing to make them. Thus, the onus to make an offer.
What's on Errol Spence Jr. in the PBC? Who else?
Errol Spence Jr. is the proverbial A side in the fight. If it gets over the line, it's supposed to happen on their platform, isn't it?
Errol Spence Jr.'s supporters and Errol Spence himself have spent enough time asserting A-side status. Well, now it's time to use it.
Otherwise, what good are you? Terrence Crawford added, I'm fucking up Jermell Charlo, he said. Put that in there. After I beat Spence, I'm moving up and I'm fucking up Jermell Charlo. End quote. Jermell's undisputed title fight, his rematch with Brian Castano, that's supposed to be going down next Saturday. That's next week. And if he wins that fight the way I think he's going to win that fight, by way of knockout, I don't imagine he sticks around long enough to where he's still there for Terrence Crawford to move up in weight and challenge him. Challenge him for those undisputed titles. Jermell Charlo, like any undisputed champion, if he wins, he's going to have a proliferation of mandatory challengers lying in wait for him.
The way I see it, if Jermell beats Brian,
If Jermell beats Brian and Jermall beats Maciej Suliecki, what might happen is we might see Jermall move up to 168, then we might see Jermell move up to 160.
Jermell's fight is next week, whereas when it comes to Crawford and Spence, we don't even have a fight date.
So when you think about that, Terrence Crawford's plan is to unseat Errol Spence Jr. as this division's premier welterweight so that he can subsequently move up in weight to take on the winner of Charlo versus Castano. But by the time he's done with Errol Spence Jr., if he's actually afforded the chance to fight him,
If he is.
Jermell might have already moved up in weight.
If Spence versus Crawford's gonna happen, it might be in, I don't know, September, October?
I mean, I don't know. If that's going to happen, I don't know exactly when we can expect that to happen. Presumably in the fall or winter months? I mean, it does seem like it's a ways out from now. And because of this, there were suspicions that perhaps Terrence Crawford might end up taking on Keith Thurman in the summer months, in the mean in between time, as a bit of a tune-up fight, if I'm being honest, because we're already a ways out from a Spence fight. But you heard what Terrence Crawford said. He doesn't want any tune-up fights. He wants to go straight into the Spence fight.
There were rumors he was going to enter into a 2-fight deal with the PBC.
We talked about those rumors here on the channel. Talked about how, at least me personally, I wouldn't mind seeing Terrence slap around Keith in the mean in between time because I don't get the sense that the Spence fight would happen in the summer months. So if Terrence Crawford can keep busy with Keith Hairline Thurman, why not?
Receding hairline Thurman.
Keith Thurman has certainly spent a lot of time telling people that he wants to crash that party. He wants to inject himself into that picture, that undisputed welterweight picture. And I see a window of opportunity for it to happen, but that's if Terrence Crawford is willing to play ball, and it sounds like he isn't. He could always change his mind, but for the time being, these are the quotes. This is what he's saying. He don't want no tune-up. He don't want no prelude. He wants Errol next.
I really can't fault him for that. He's waited long enough.
And when it comes to this fight, we haven't heard much in terms of new news. Things have gone pretty quiet, pretty silent, and one can interpret that silence as perhaps things happening behind the scenes.
Sometimes that's how it happens, the calm before the storm.
Let's hope that's the case, because this one's long overdue, and these two boys, they're not getting any younger.
Errol Spence Jr. is presumed to be in tip-top shape.
So why wait? Make the fight.